first of all, I should ask this question before we explain Romeo and Juliet. Do you like Romeo and Juliet?
Well, it was not one of my favorite reads in high school. I'm not going to lie, I probably sparked notes at a time or two.
Or the whole thing?
Or the whole thing. So I'm familiar with it more through Taylor Swift more than anything. Yeah.
That is not Romeo and Juliet because she's not willing to die for a person. So
I've seen Romeo and Juliet, the movie.
Nice. You know.
It's a good love story, though.
It is a great love story. So, how it relates to young love. In Romeo and Juliet is a unique story because it's specifically about young love. It's about this woman and this man, and realistically, as you know, we know that they're younger, which is unique, the fact that they are younger, and they fall in love, but they're at different families. And as the families are suffering and combating each other and fighting each other, out of all these things, these two young people fall in love. And they fall in love into a space that is amazing because they reject family traits for love. Now, with it, most people hate Romeo and Juliet in our society, mainly because of all the factors that we discussed previously about not wanting to fall in love young, thinking it's stupid, thinking you're making a mistake, not seeing a benefit to it. But historically, Romeo and Juliet is the exact opposite. It's been loved. There's a reason you mention it all the time. Other than the Bible, I believe it's one of the most quoted or referenced things ever. I mean, we just talked about the Taylor Swift song, and that's just one of them. And Romeo and Juliet, whatever the heck that is.
Animated movie made for kids.
All right. And
it was a lot more visually... I'm a visual learner, so it's easier to understand.
It was easier to understand, yeah.
There's a lot of wisdom in it.
Was there? So Romeo and Juliet is this idea that she and him, or Romeo and him, are made for each other. Realistically, that's kind of how it's framed. And they're like, oh, it's just stupid young. Why would you die for somebody? But I don't actually see that. When I look at Romeo and Juliet, the reason it's such a powerful story is because it's a story that tells us about young love, and it tells us the importance of how to date and how to be married. That is one of the difficult things. So when you look at Romeo and Juliet, we'll start at the beginning. Obviously, Romeo is introduced, and as Romeo is introduced, there's fighting, that's all backstory. But Romeo's introduced, and he's in love with this girl named Rosalind. And he's pining for her, and Mercutio, who's a huge man, supposedly, in the actual story, he's a great fighter. He comes up to Romeo, and they have this discussion about how Mercutio's a fighter, and how Romeo is a lover, and how he's just so in love with Rosalind. And Rosalind's the greatest woman ever, and he can never have it. So Mercutio, in all of this, decides to take Romeo to the Capulets' house, the mortal enemies of the Montesquieu's, Romeo's family, and they fought already, to take him there to get his mind off of Rosalind. Which, first of all, that's exactly how boys work, right?
Yeah, if we can't deal with it, just distract ourselves.
Just like distract, yeah. You're like, hey, I can't do this.
Call of Duty. Sorry.
Horrible. Yes, but so we distracted. So he's like, takes her there, and as he's there, something happens. Romeo and Juliet see each other, and they cross paths, and they lock eyes, and in that moment, something hits. And I think this is right at the beginning, the thing that people hate about Romeo and Juliet is
love at first sight.
The love at first sight. Now, is it love at first sight is the actual question.
Yeah, I mean, is it lust at first sight or is it love at first sight? You know?
Well, what do you think? Do you think they were in love at first sight? Do you think you can be in love at first sight?
That, I feel like, is a loaded question. I think, yes, you can, but at the same time, it's a dangerous thing to throw around. It's kind of like a two sides of the coin kind of thing. I mean, I feel like you can be super attracted and kind of, feel a connection with somebody just by like making eye contact or whatever it may be. But you also don't know that person.
Right.
And it's dangerous to say, I love that person when you know nothing about them.
All right. So you think it's impossible. Now, I don't want to
say it's impossible. I think it is possible. But I don't think that's the way people should lead going into saying, this is the way I'm going to fall in love.
I would actually say this is the normal way of falling in love.
Okay.
And I know that sounds horrible, especially in our day and age with Tinder, internet dating. Most people that are older, younger people still meet each other physically. But most people that are older are meeting people that are right there or
Making
on the
snap
internet.
decisions, yeah.
Yeah. And so Romeo and Juliet has this beginning that is probably just how love works. And that is, we make our first impressions immediately. So the immediate first impression of Romeo is what?
From Juliet?
Yes.
She's in love. I mean, he's a handsome dude, I'm assuming. He's, you know.
Okay, so that's Juliet. What did Juliet think of Romeo? Take it from the male's perspective now.
Okay, what did Romeo think about Juliet?
Romeo crossed his eyes with Juliet. What was his thought? First time they ever seen each other.
I need to have this woman.
Why?
She's beautiful. She's... Honestly, when you kind of like it, maybe there was just a connection there. Like, it felt like there was some kind of intense connection.
I think it was simply, she pretty. I like her. I want to talk to her. Now, this is the difference between lust and love at first sight. The idea of lust is she hot, I want to have sex. Love at first sight, or this is she's attractive, or she's hot, I want to talk to her. Not directly have sex. I want to talk to her.
I agree. I think that's a good delineation because it starts from the same point.
It does. And I think we can demonize the fact that we have a physical desire to be with something. I mean, there's a reality that every man and woman that is dating and is married should somewhat keep themselves attractive.
Very practical advice. I just gave this the other day. Like, talking to a couple of young girls saying, very practical in the Bible. And Ruth, Naomi tells Ruth, pretty much take a shower, put on some perfume, and look nice. Put on your nice clothes, and you're going to attract Boaz. So I think it's very practical just for guys and girls. Be clean, smell good, and wear something nice.
It's not that hard.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it's like, if you look in the mirror and you're like, I look homeless, I don't care how cool you are, you probably should say, I should not be dressing like this.
Yeah.
So we have this, so they see each other, they're like, man, I'm really attracted. Split second. You know if you're attracted to somebody almost immediately. You have that first impression. Your first impression is built off of years of what you're attracted to, so you have that first impression. What happens next in Romeo and Juliet? It's really kind of a cool thing.
I'm not super familiar. You're going to have to
They
help me out.
talk.
They talk. Okay.
All right, now you're like, oh,
I know the gist of
you're
the
like,
story,
sweet
but
joke.
like...
So they sit there and they just talk. And that's all they do is they talk, but not well. And yes, they kiss in the first thing, but they talk first.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting thing because we underestimate how quickly we can realize if we like or hate somebody. And I know this is a controversial thing when you sit there and say, your first impressions, if you like or hate somebody, is probably right. Well, what if that person redeems themselves? What if that person doesn't? And what if you just hate and dread being around them? Now, I'm not trying to say that we hate people, but when you're in the dating thing, you have to talk and be like, I actually want to talk to this person again. So Romeo and Juliet, they talk. They want to talk again. That's a big deal. So now you have the makings of love. It is that simple. Love is, I see you, you are pretty. I talk to you, you are not annoying. I can talk to you more. That is the ingredients for love. That's all it is. Because if Romeo and Juliet talked and Romeo was like, you're super annoying.
And there's a willingness to go forward with it.
Right.
That's kind of the other piece of it. There's a willingness to move forward,
Absolutely. They wanted, they seen something valuable. So in that moment, here they are, they're talking. Romeo is kicked out of the party, basically. Him and Mercutio, they're asked to leave because, mortal enemies and whatnot. And as they're leaving, Romeo jumps out, climbs the wall, and waits, which is super creepy sounding. He waits under her door, or her window, which...
Is this the story where he held up the boombox and was playing?
Almost.
Yeah.
But no, this is the story where he just waits. And Shakespeare didn't tell us how long he waited, but they weren't kicked out of the party at the beginning of the party. Juliet didn't just go to her bedroom, but he waited. And he waits there. And there's a value there in this relationship, because Romeo is there waiting for her. Now, what is he doing in those moments? Now, this is where two becomes one, is a really important thing. What does Romeo think he's doing as he's waiting for this girl? Now, first of all, I'm not suggesting that guys just creepily wait outside girls' windows, but in this story...
That's a very good disclaimer there. But, there's probably... I mean, if I'm sitting there and I'm trying to, say this is me in this scenario kind of thing, or kind of I'm probably playing through a million different scenarios in my head. What am I going to say? How am I going to say this? Probably butterflies galore. And you're thinking every little detail of what you're going to say to try to woo her, get her attention, whatever it may be.
All right, now what about the fact that they're mortal enemies? Their families are mortal enemies.
And you're probably thinking the scenario of the blowback between the families, but at the same time, it's like, who cares? At the same time,
who cares? Huh?
I personally would be saying who cares, but I mean, the way the story goes, I can imagine he's saying who cares.
Well, the way the story goes, but you really think about how that moment that Romeo has to be in. Here he is. He's in that moment. Romeo and Juliet's there. Or Romeo is there. Families hate each other. He is intrigued greatly by the daughter of his family's mortal enemy. He means his family's going to reject him. It means her family will reject him. It means he could be killed. It means everything can go wrong. There is no winning for Romeo in this situation.
So that kind of brings up the question, at least for me then, is, when it comes to things like relationships, how much do you think you should weigh in your family's opinion about different things? Because I mean, there's probably wisdom in listening and getting perspective and points of view. But I mean, if you look at Romeo and Juliet, they're sworn enemies. You go tell your family that you want to date them, it's like, no, get away from that.
Well, how much should you do it? None. 0.
Absolutely nothing.
Your family has no say. Because if your family has a say, you are not building a marriage. And the reason I say this is, in Genesis, it's interesting because out of everything, God makes everything. Adam names all the things. Adam has this, is like, there's no helpers for me. There's no one compatible with me. And God's like, I know, I'm going to make her from you. And there's an imagery of the side, and it's a really cool imagery that happens there. But what happens is Adam awakes, and he sees her, and he's like, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, which is literally the same as Romeo. You are hot. That was Adam's first response to Eve, was, you are attractive. That's what the text says.
Whoa, man.
That's exactly it. And God's like, I know. Like, think about that. Like, God's like, I know you find her attractive. And that is good. So he does that. And then God says, okay, this is really weird. He looks at Adam and Eve. And before he makes any other covenants, before he does anything else, he gives them marital advice. And I think we discount marital advice and the implications of that marital advice. Because the marital advice is very, very interesting. Because marital advice is, you shall leave your father and mother, and the two shall become one flesh. Now, first of all, it's weird because Adam nor Eve had a mother or father. So, obviously, it was for humanity, not for Adam and Eve. Like, we can just deduce that. You don't have to have a PhD to understand that. Okay. Right there. So, this is for humanity. They leave their father and mother, they shall become one. Now, in that, what are the implications? Who has a say in the marriage?
Just them.
Who does not have a say in the marriage?
Nobody else.
The father and the mother. And
Yeah.
specifically the father and the mother. This is the cool thing. Specifically. Because fathers and mothers destroy so many marriages. So many relationships. If your son or daughter is in love with somebody, you don't get a say. If you answer back, if you clap back, if you do any of that, you are wrong. That's the truth. You are just wrong. You are destroying. Basically, you are putting a knife into that relationship.
Do you think specifically moms and dads need to go out a better way of counseling their children when it comes to relationships?
Yeah, but stop.
Just stop altogether?
Demonstrate. If you demonstrate to your kids what a good marriage is, your kids, this is what Freud found. And even if you demonstrate a bad marriage, this is what he found. Is that if you find this, and if you do this, you demonstrate it, as you demonstrate what's happening, you will immediately, your kids will want to do what you did. They will emulate you, basically. So you can have, if you have a great marriage, if you show your wife or your daughter how to love you show her what it means to love by you loving her mother, she will look for a man that loves her as they love you. That is a big deal. That is a really, really big deal. And as that happens, we actually have to really look at how this works and why this works in this way. Because they say, or you demonstrate it, you ask, they follow. So there's the second path, and that's where you teach your daughter, your son, how not to love. So you demonstrate a bad marriage. No words you give will undo what you have already done. You can give the greatest advice, but your actions have completely said you are wrong. Your ethos, because your ethos is bad, your ethics are bad, your words, your logos, mean nothing. So how much should a parent have advice into their relationship with their kids? 0. Why? Because they've already done it by their actions. No words can actually help. Now, does that mean that a marriage shouldn't get good words? No, but that's not for the parents.
And then I guess the other side of the coin, which could also be kind of like an interesting route to go down, is talking about, the children or the people who grew up in dysfunctional homes or grew up with bad examples of marriage, and you're looking to get in one yourself, but you never had that modeled for you. And you just had dysfunction modeled for you. So how would you say you teach these other people going about into a relationship, or what they should be looking to change that kind of dynamic that they ultimately grew up with? Like, how do they change that for themselves?
Number 1, be honest about what you want. So, number 1, how do you change it? You be honest with what you want. Not realistic. I want you to be honest with your desires, your true desires.
Big self-awareness needs to happen there. Like,
for you. And there's a reason. So you need to ask that question and say, I grew up in dysfunction. I do not want to have the marriage of my parents. For whatever reason. You have to then ask this question, what do I honestly want my marriage to look like? That has to be a question. And not what I realistically want, no, what I really desire. Now those desires can be big, and I want you to be honest with that question. Because I want you to ask this question. I want you to go, do I want my marriage to look like this person or that person? Because there's different. We compare all the time, and we compare for reasons. It's good. So we look at it and say, okay, I want my marriage, what I want to do is I want to live this way in this manner. I want you to be honest about that. I want you to be honest about how you want for you, your wife, and you to interact. How you should love her. How she loves you back. Now, this is the key. You answer it honestly. And I don't care what the honesty is.
How crazy, how stupid it may be,
right.
Or narcissistic, whatever it may be. Like,
no, I just want it honest, yeah. I mean, you could even say, I want to live homes. I want to be a homesteader, in Montana, and as I homestead in Montana, I want to have no birth control, and I want to have 100 kids. Maybe not 100, but I want a lot of I want to have a quiver full, and I want to have pigs and farms and all those things, and I want my wife to be at home taking care of the home, and she might say, if she has this desire, I want my man to be a man. And you hear women say this.
Yeah.
And they'll say this, but then they're not honest because they don't live that. So I want you to be honest about your desires. And most of us will have realistic desires. Some of us will have ridiculous desires. Well, the ones that have ridiculous desires have a lot of work to do to get them. But that's beside the point. When you look at it, so you're honest with yourself, then you have this question. This is what I want. Next hard thing. Find somebody else that has done it.
Like the way you want to do it?
Correct. Not somebody that's looking to mentor you. Not somebody that's looking to give advice about marriage. Not somebody that's like, look how great my marriage is. No. I want the person that's from that dysfunction. Because remember, they're the ones observing. Find somebody that is like that. So if you want to have a life where, you have 2 breadwinners in the home that raise their family, do all these things, whatever that is, find that model. Honestly find that model. And then ask them, and seriously ask them questions. Let them be the person you observe.
And this might be maybe a little bit too granular, but one of the things whenever I'm listening to podcasts or whatever it may be, and you hear people giving advice, it sounds like great advice, which
right.
It is. And then you want to say, okay, well, I want to go apply this. I need to go find somebody. But then you're like, oh man, my social circle doesn't have any of this. What advice would you give to people? Say,
go out of your social circle.
Go out of your social circle. Get involved in X, Y, Z to find people.
Here's the amazing thing about humans. If you want to immolate them, they will let you in. They love that. Humans love to mentor.
Makes you feel valued.
You're extremely valued. So if you look at these people and you say to them, I want to be like you. I want this to be something that we are a part of together.
And honestly, that takes humility to do that. A massive amount of humility to just tell somebody, like, I don't like the way things are going. I want to be like you.
Right. And that person will generally, you might get rejected, or you might not. Obviously, don't pick a superstar. You can't get close to them. Okay, that's just the answer. Pick somebody that's real. That in realistic meaning you can actually talk to them if they're outside your social circle. They're gonna want that relationship. And if you don't like them, if you meet them, you're like, I don't want to be like them. Drop them immediately. Be like, I'm sorry, it's not working out.
Yeah.
It's better for you. It's better for them.
Yeah.
They're not. And don't look at them as like new parents. Just say, how did you do this? How did you love your wife? How did you do these things? That's true. That's how you would get that good dynamic.
No, 100%. And the reason why I say that's because, when you listen to different podcasts, whether it be this or something else, or you read all these books or you listen to all these sermons and all great advice, but one of the things I found even for myself is like, at the end of the day, like, it becomes a lot of head knowledge where you know these things.
Right.
It's frustrating when you hear people saying, oh, you should just do it. I know I should be doing these things. But then the application piece is lacking, and you come up with 1,000,001 different excuses. And so for maybe, I don't know if anybody else kind of struggles with that too, but it's kind of like, take next steps. Don't be afraid to go put yourself out there and take the action towards getting what you want to do or what you want to emulate.
Right.
I think that's the biggest thing. Is you can sit here and listen to this all day, and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't change anything. Like, there has to be an action and application process.
Right. There has to be.
Yeah.
And so you go and find it. But back to your parents, and realistically, the truth is Romeo and Juliet will demonstrate, even if there's a dysfunctional marriage, it can still be good. Because even in that, the Capulets have a horrible marriage. Shakespeare was very clearly wrote that the Capulets were horrible at caring for each other. They didn't actually care for each other. They cared for, their marriage was basically, a show and a political thing, and there's implications that the mother was wanting to hook up with the guy, the prince that she was trying to set Juliet with. There's implications that there might have been some incestual things with the Prince of Cats, who dies later. We'll get into that. But there's that. So they didn't have a good marriage. But Juliet is a great wife, and we're actually going to see that. Even in 3 days, she's a great wife. She was only married for 3 days. She was one of the greatest wives ever. For 3 days. She dies, but whatever. So in this, parents don't get a say. But Romeo has to sit there. And now go back to the scene. His mortal enemy he is intrigued in. Now there's a taboo element that's really important there. That's exciting. You're going to want to date somebody that's not exactly like you. It's fun. It's different. It's okay. If you are out there and as a man and you're sitting there going, man, I'm attracted to emo girls. I'm attracted to some dark stuff. Man, I'm attracted to this over here. I'm attracted to that over there. That's okay. That taboo is okay. Because Romeo is in that taboo moment. He's in that, there can't be anything more taboo than marrying or falling in love with your family's mortal enemy. I don't care what if you want to date some crazy situation, you want to date some girl that's crazy, go for it. Do it. Do it well. That might be what you're attracted to. You might sit there and go, I want a lot of drama in my life. Because I'm boring as all get out. Have you ever noticed the women that are the most drama marry the men with the least drama? Have you ever thought there might be a correlation of why? But that's okay. So whatever you're attracted to, do it. And that's really what Romeo has to get through. Because he knows, I'm attracted to somebody, I like somebody that's a taboo. Somebody that my family's going to reject. Somebody that society is going to say, why did you do this? Now, he's there. He's sitting and waiting. We don't know how long, but he's sitting and waiting. And as he's there, the famous scene comes out. Juliet comes out onto her balcony, and she says, Romeo, Romeo, where art thou, my Romeo? Which is the famous line from there. And he does something that's so honest. And the honesty of Shakespeare here probably hurts me. She just called out for Romeo, and he doesn't say a word. So there's two things first, because at the beginning he could have been like, I'm here, and freaked her out. She gets freaked out later, but
what guy doesn't just all of a sudden clamor up when,
exactly.
Guys, I hate to break to you, we're not as smooth as what we think we are. So
guys are horrible at dating. It is one of the most pathetic things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
To watch dating. I'm like, the dance, you guys need to learn how to dance a little bit better. And generally when you know how to dance, you get married really quickly and you don't get to dance in that scene anymore. You actually get to dance in a better way, but that's okay. Oh. So Romeo, he clams up. He doesn't say anything. But then he does the next thing that's so honest. She starts spilling her heart about the very thoughts he's probably having. She starts spilling her heart, like, he's my enemy there. And he just listens. Greatest thing he ever does. And Juliet does something that he doesn't know, but she actually gives permission for Romeo to pursue her there.
I think it's funny. We talked about this before off camera, but guys specifically, maybe girls too, but we got to be a lot better at listening and having emotional intelligence. It's very selective, I found in my life. When I feel like I'm in this role of I'm giving advice or whatever, then I listen real great and I give the greatest advice. But the second, the girl you're dating or the girl you're married to comes in and she's having a bad day and she's just talking, and I'm like, what's the solution I got to give? What's the solution I get? What's the solution I got to give? And you miss everything that she's saying because you don't listen to her. It's kind of an issue. And so...
Or she just doesn't have anything important to say.
Or it could be, I don't know. But
do we want to go with that? In this one, she says something important to say.
And I think the bigger thing is what I'm saying is, if you learn how to listen correctly and pay attention to the cues. You can learn a lot about a person just by doing that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it sounds really basic and really cliche just saying that. I know I'm really like, I became aware of it after a failed relationship, and I'm like, I suck at listening. And I'm sure a lot of guys do too. I'm not sure, I know a lot of guys are too.
So when we listen, and so back to Romeo and Juliet. So Juliet is there. Romeo clams up, which is what, it's basically he cyber stalks Juliet.
Yep.
And yes, that's what happens. He's there. He's listening. And Juliet has this honest response. And I'm going to tell you, if Juliet was out there and saying, how dare that Romeo come? I bet you he wouldn't show up later. I bet you he's going to just sneak away like he came. But instead, she's having this heartfelt thing. And what she's doing is she's opening her heart. She's opening who she is up to Romeo. She's giving him permission. And it's beautiful, this beautiful moment. And then he shows up. Boom. And they're there, and they kiss, and they have that balcony scene. And at that moment, they make a rash decision. What is a rash decision? Everyone knows it. They decide to get married. Okay, now, timeline-wise, think about this. Earlier that morning, Romeo was in love with Rosalind. Romeo goes to one party, sees attractive woman,
Forgets all about Rosalind,
and is kind of engaged. They're not fully engaged at this moment. The nurse does that, but that's okay. They're kind of engaged that night. It is an insanely fast turnaround. Now, we look at it and go, that is just stupid. Is it? I mean, is it stupid? That's really the question. Is that what they did stupid?
That's a good question.
I don't think it's stupid.
No.
I actually think they're making the right decision.
And why do you think that?
Here's why. When they're looking at the gravity of the whole situation, when they're looking at everything that's going on, when Romeo's looking at it, no matter what, he could not see a life without Juliet. He's seen his death with Juliet. There was no other option. The other thing that happens is the only way for this to work in Romeo and Juliet is immense, unbridled commitment. Not love, commitment. It is yes or no. And our yes will equal death, and our no will equal death. Just with a part. They really are at this place where he's asking a question. He knows the gravity of that situation. He's making that commitment to her. Now, back to the Rosalind thing. With Rosalind, we have to ask that question going, wait, was Romeo actually in love with Rosalind? And maybe Romeo wasn't in love with Rosalind. We don't know that. He might have been, in a Twitter-pated moment. He might have been in a lust moment. He did talk about how beautiful she was. We know that. So we don't know, but all we know is that something happened with Juliet that was so encapsulating that he literally just sat there and said, this is good, I'm going to do this. She was sitting there going, this is good, I'm going to do this also. And not only that, they make this commitment. And this commitment is incredible. This commitment is telling the world, I choose you. Which is a bold thing. So the next day happens. They go in, Romeo leaves. Nurse shows up and says, she will marry you. Meet tomorrow at this time at the Catholic Church of the town. And Romeo says, I'll get it done. Which is, by the way, the greatest thing. Because one, Romeo could back out at that moment. It wasn't an eloping. There was a one-night thing. Plus, he had to then do the work. If you want to marry somebody, you better do work. Like, Juliet had to hide from her family. Romeo had to meet with the pastor. He had to set up a wedding. He had to get everything in order.
All while keeping it a secret.
All while keeping it a secret. He had to go convince a priest who knew the families, because he was a priest over both families, that's the greatest failure. And there's a story there on the church side as well that we might get into, but it's not for now. So he has to go. So she says, boom, I'm going to go get married. They go get married. Or he goes to the priest. And the priest sits there and goes, weren't you just in love with Rosalind? Which is funny because it does show that there is an element that the priest knew what was going on. And Romeo's like, I don't care about Rosalind anymore. I just care about Juliet. And the priest has to make this decision going, do I marry them? Do I sit there and marry these two young people?
Do we know why he fell out of love with Rosalind? Did she just not like him? Or do we know why in the story?
Nope. We know that they were not together. Shakespeare was silent on it. But he did want to include it.
I mean, because it kind of sounds to me like he was ready to commit to her, but she wasn't ready to commit to him, kind of thing.
Could have been.
That's what I get from it.
I would say that that's probably more of you're putting your own emotions into that. We have no idea.
It could be. I mean,
I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I haven't read that story or that section in detail recently to really get there. Could be.
And the only reason I say that is because at least we only get the perspective of where he is so heartbroken over her in that beginning.
Right.
And in just me inferring a little bit, he's heartbroken because she doesn't want to commit to him. That's where I come up with that kind of conclusion.
It could be. It also could be she didn't want to get married to a crazy Montesquieu that's going to war with a Capulet for the rest of his life. I mean, that's a real possibility.
Yeah.
I have no idea. You're probably you're probably right on there. I just don't know.
Yeah. And I'm going to let you keep going on. The only reason I try to make that clarification is because I have one little area where I'd want to go with it. Go ahead.
Okay. So Romeo has to go to this priest and say, I want to marry. The priest says, you are in love. The priest has to make this decision. And we underestimate what the role of the priest here. And oftentimes we see Romeo and Juliet and we say, okay, it's a story about these two, but this priest has a really big role. And the priest in that time, in 16th century England, the role of the priest, the role of the church at that point was most likely the priests were the most educated, wise people of the town. They were the thinkers, if you will. And this is part of church history. This is what they were, the thinkers. They're the ones that push science forward. There's even an element of that in Romeo and Juliet. They're the ones that dwelled, and there's a concept there of knowing God and being able to know God there. So this priest who has that gravity of a situation, and they make it clear in Romeo and Juliet, decides to marry them. Now, the crazy thing, he decides to marry them without telling their parents. That's fun. At the wedding, it appears that there's 4 people there. That's how most plays write it. That's how most plays directed. They have 4 people. The nurse, Juliet, Romeo, and another male. It's generally one of his kinsmen. That is who's there. That's how it's mostly portrayed.
Gotcha.
That's all that's there. Well, they get married. Parents don't know, so you're not going to have a reception. It's really cheap, by the way. If you want to do this, your parents will not pay a lot of money, but that's okay. So they get married. Bam. Then the stupidest thing happens. Stupidest thing happens in the world. They leave each other. And Romeo goes to tell the good news to his best friend. This is the coolest thing. So he tells us, which is an amazing thing. We brag about our good things to our best friends all the time. So Romeo is very human. Mm-hmm. Well, in this moment, the Prince of Cats comes, kills Mercutio because he's beating the crud out of Romeo. Romeo won't fight him. So he kills Mercutio. Mercutio does this famous thing, a curse on both your households. And in that moment, Romeo responds in rage. Now, a lot of people have said that and looked at it and viewed the dichotomy between Romeo's love and Romeo's rage as kind of interchangeable. I don't think so. I actually think the rage was a response. The love was something that he was choosing. And I think that Shakespeare marries these two very well, because we can have a response and then choose. So here's this moment that they go in and they're driving away, or not driving away, they're fleeing away, and Romeo kills the Prince of Cats, Juliet's cousin. Now,
dun dun dun.
Romeo just killed Juliet's cousin.
Talk about some family drama.
Talk about some family drama.
Baby mama drama.
Now, what do you think would happen?
She probably mad.
That's what you assume.
That's what you would assume. Yeah.
Okay. Juliet knows. And people don't dwell on that enough.
And she doesn't care, does she?
Well, he comes back to her room. He's banished from all of time from the town, which is a fun thing for him. Banished from all of time. And as he's banished from all of time, the priest says, go to Juliet. Now, once again, the wise priest says, go. Go to her. He sneaks up to her balcony again, goes into her bedroom, where she's mourning the Prince of Cats, her cousin, that her husband killed. Her whole family...
This whole thing has started a war between them.
Hates each other.
Yeah.
Like, Romeo is public enemy number one. Like, you can't get worse than Romeo. So, Romeo's number one. Or Romeo is enemy number one. They come in. What do? It's really crazy. They have sex. Wait, your response was, she's going to be mad. Her response was, we're going to have sex.
It must have been a Friday night and they were looking for a reason to make up. I don't know.
Yeah, I know, actually. This is a really important fact. It's one of the crazy things why Romeo and Juliet is so important, because it hits us on this level because of what she does here. So now, we have to look at the whole gravity of the situation. Mortal enemies. They chose each other. Everything went wrong. Juliet still chose Romeo. She chose her husband over her family.
See, and that's kind of where I figured you were going with it. That's why I mentioned that earlier about her, or Rosalind not choosing him. It doesn't say that. I just kind of inferred that into the text. And it's kind of like he got the extreme opposite of what he wanted on the first hand.
The absolute extreme opposite.
Yeah.
Because she chose him. The commitment there was there. And this is why it's so beautiful. Romeo had nothing to gain from marrying Juliet. Juliet had nothing to gain from marrying Romeo.
Actually had everything to lose.
It had everything to lose, and they still chose each other. Is there a more pure love than that? I mean, I can see Jesus, but
yeah, I mean,
but in a romantic sense, in a story,
man and woman,
there is no more pure love than that.
I was kind of think of Jose and Gomer a little bit. I mean, where he chose her, but I mean, she obviously was not choosing him. But that's kind of where my mind slightly goes.
At least they were
At
together.
Least it was a together thing.
They were together in this.
A little more functional as a relationship.
So Romeo and Juliet, they're together. They consummate the marriage. And this gets really. They consummate the marriage. They're like, we're gonna get married, consummate it. Romeo has to leave. Romeo goes out. Juliet is then forced to be engaged to this other man, because the family doesn't know she's married. Drives me nuts, but that's okay. Family doesn't know so she comes up with a plan to pretend to be dead, so Romeo can come get her, so she can go into exile with him. Now, I want you to really get that, because we always think that Romeo's coming back to town and they're going to have this like grand party and everyone's going to love each other. No, that was never their plan. Their plan was Romeo comes back, picks Juliet up, basically, leaves forever, and no one will ever look for them again. That's their plan. And it's like, okay, that's a good plan. I mean, realistically, that's probably the best plan. They have way too much baggage back home. Families hate each other. It's best for you guys to leave. Talk about dysfunctional families, right? Get the heck out of Dodge. The priest is like, leave town. So in that moment, Romeo hears she died. Doesn't get the message. Yes, and all the plays, all the movies, all the shows show how infuriating it is not to get that message. So he doesn't get the message. And they die. They kill him. Well, he kills himself.
And she kills herself.
And then she kills herself, which is a funny thing. And it's actually kind of interesting that Shakespeare does it this way, because Romeo poisons himself, which is not a normal way for men to kill themselves. And she uses a dagger, which is a more normal way. He reverses some things. It's really kind of fascinating that he does that. And I'm not exactly sure why. And I've read some theories on why, but it's just weird that they do it that way.
Yeah.
And some of the ideas is that Romeo wanted to die in the same manner as Juliet, because she died by poison. That's what the rumor was.
Yeah.
And Juliet was a moment of opportunity, but I think that there's an element there that, you know, she wanted to die by poison, but she chose something else too. But that's usually where people go wrong. And they're like, I hate Romeo and Juliet, because why would you kill yourself? Why would you kill yourself over your spouse? Did you hear the story? Like, I honestly, I'm like, do you hate love that much? Have you given up on humanity to the point where you don't believe love actually matters? Like, that's the actual response. Have you given up on humanity that much? Because this response is an interesting thing here, because Romeo and Juliet, they chose love. There was no greater love than they had for each other. Now, their love was immense, because what it was is they chose each other with no benefit. It was a pure choosing. And we go back to that beginning where they're looking at each other. They see each other. I like you. You don't annoy me. I'm going to get married to you. I love this. Bam. We're together. They're choosing each other. They're committed to death. To death do them part. And they're parted at death. Together, but parted. And that's the moment that they're there. Now, you see some interesting things. How does that apply to us?
Yeah.
The real question is, are you willing to love that much? I'm not asking anyone to die.
Maybe that has something to do with like the divorce rates and stuff with the way they are. Just purely because it's seen a little more as transactional as opposed to literally unconditional, like to the death. We are going to love each other. Dying to ourselves, dying to every single thing else, and choose each other no matter what.
Right. I mean, there's stories of legend. Taylor Swift sings about it.
It's a great song.
It's not a great song, but it's okay.
Bop.
Wow. No, but she does it. But you actually think...
For the record, she did explain everything you just explained in less than 3 minutes, so... I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Except for the fact that... Let me ask this question. How many marriages fight about sex, and Juliet decided to have sex with her husband after he killed her cousin? Like, just think about that one. Like, really think about that fact.
Yeah.
Okay, Romeo messed up. He should not have killed him. He responded out of anger. Now, granted, that was an extreme circumstance. But take that out. We get mad and fight over stupid things, generally around this topic. And in that topic, what happens is all of a sudden, we're fighting, and it's like, oh, well, you didn't want to do this, you didn't want to do that. Juliet chose him. It's way over her head. Romeo set up a marriage. Romeo worked his butt off. He was willing to
forsake everything for her.
For her.
Yeah, it's and that's my biggest takeaway from all that is, like, if you get to that point, okay, there's that initial attraction phase and all that, but if you can get to that death point where you see yourself dying for that woman, or vice versa, the same thing with a woman with a man, and you both have that and you both commit. That's kind of the key ingredient there is, are you both willing to die and commit? Because if not, if one foot's in the door, one foot's out the door, it's doomed to fail from the start.
Yeah. It is absolutely without that death to commitment. You have to be so committed that you're willing to die. Now, the problem is most people aren't willing to commit anything at all.
Not even an Instagram post.
It's that stupid that we don't have that. So can you fall in love? Yes. But are you willing to commit that much? The answer is you have to answer it yes or no. And know that most people, especially in America, choose the answer is no. And this is in and outside of the church. In and outside of the church, they choose no. They're like, I'm not that committed. I don't care. It's bad.
Why do you think that is?
Selfishness. Absolute selfishness. We are incredibly selfish because we like to have one foot in, one foot out.
I also kind of see it with like maybe even a slightly deeper root is fear. You know, because I mean, I think that selfishness comes out of a place of trying to protect yourself from the fear of getting hurt. Or the fear of, you know, not even just, I guess rejection's a big piece of that, but...
Right.
I mean, you know, whether it's just the emotional damage, the monetary damage, the maybe physical damage, whatever it may be, and there's that element of wanting to protect from getting that out. So it's easier for, yeah, I'm going to show interest here, but the second you show any signs of this, I'm out, so that way I don't get hurt. Because if you're not going to die for me, I'm not going to die for you. That's kind of what the mentality is.
Right. I actually think that could be a very good one. Yeah. Fear. I mean, it really gets into the idea with fear of we're so self-preserving that we're willing to miss everything to preserve something that's going to burn anyways. Sounds like a Nine Inch Nails song. You know, I hurt myself today. It's really interesting. The other fact is, I think we have this idea that it's not worth it for us to be committed. Like there's something better out there than commitment.
You know, and that I think that's another big one is facing is if I settle down here, will I be missing out on something better? Will there be somebody better? Will I miss out on, you know, and I think that could be a big...
do you think that there is one true person for you, like a soulmate?
No.
What do you think?
See, and I'm looking at this through a church lens.
Okay.
Just because that's how I know it is, you know, if people try to say there is God's perfect choice for you, if that person dies, the Bible makes it clear that you can go remarry. So if your perfect choice dies, God's perfect choice for you dies, and then you go marry somebody else, well then you're marrying somebody else's perfect choice for them. I mean, I think there's this whole thing of choice involved where God gives you choices to use wisdom and use wisdom.
Right.
Go make a choice about who you want to marry.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. And I think it's a dangerous trap saying it's only one person. And I'm not saying that maybe there's not you can't use wisdom to find a better choice of the choices that you have. And it's kind of a complex subject, but I don't think there's just one single...
I think there is one choice, but it's not in the way you think.
Explain.
I would say the one choice is the one you made. That is your choice.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, you make that choice, you make that choice. That's the vows, the death to his part. It's a very important thing.
I think it's the second part of it, yeah.
And so I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's not like God made one choice for you. I just think that the fact is that when you make a choice to get married, that choice is not to be taken lightly. There's never a culture in society until our really messed up culture that we look at and go, we're doing great, we're not doing great. Things are not going great for us.
And, and not even to get down like a theological road, but I think you see how serious, and this isn't even just biblically, like cultures across history make this huge deal about covenants. And I think there is a reason that God makes marriage, and he calls marriage a covenant between two people.
Right.
And it's like a contract on steroids, literally to the death. Like,
yeah.
I don't think in our culture we view it like that anymore. We literally look at it as like a contract with loopholes that I can get out of.
Yeah.
Not a covenant.
If something better comes up, I can take that instead.
This isn't the Denver Broncos. I mean, I guess it kind of is the Denver Broncos. You're stuck with Russell Wilson for 4 years, whether you like it or not.
Right.
So, you got to take the hit if you want to get rid of him.
Exactly.
That's my football analogy for marriage.
Is Russell Wilson? That is a bad marriage.
I am married to him, for better or worse.
It's really interesting though, because when you actually think about that, of that whole idea between the covenant, we don't value a covenant.
Can you explain high level what a covenant is for people? Because that's one of those churchy words that gets thrown around.
So a covenant is a churchy world. It's a biblical world, and that's where we use it now. It is not strictly a biblical concept though, because
it's been used across cultures and history with
there's many different books in ancient Near East specifically.
Yeah.
Literature on covenants. Covenants were found in Egypt, Mesopotamia. The Ugaritic literature has covenants in it. You even have it in Babylon. Some of Canaanite has covenants in it. Canaanite just doesn't have a lot of literature that we know of, that we found. So we see it in all of these things. So a covenant is something, is a commitment, from one entity to another. An overall commitment that spans space and time. And that is what a covenant is.
And it's bound by blood. Like, it's saying, if this isn't fulfilled, you have the right to kill me.
In some cultures, right? Yes. But realistically, with a covenant, there is no out.
Yeah, there's no out.
There is no out of a covenant. There's not, you do this, I do this. No, that's not how a covenant works. That's not how a covenant works. So in the marriage covenant, God created for them to be one flesh and to be one together. Now, the one together is not it. There's more than just them being one together, because the next verse says they were both naked and unashamed, which has this weird dichotomy of them being open to each other and seeing their flaws and seeing their wickedness, but also seeing that back to the, like when we talked last time about the breast of the wife of the youth, you're in that unashamed moment there. So that covenant is binding. Now, the issue is that most covenants that are human made do have outs. They do, and that's one of the things. Even in Near Eastern covenants, they have some outs in them, and marriage can have some outs, and we can discuss that if we really want, but that's not really the point.
Yeah,
It's the really the big issue here is, are you committed to it? So when, like Romeo and Juliet, they were utterly committed to each other. It's a beautiful love story.
And I think one of the stigmas that comes out is like, man, if I'm committed to this person, I'm going to be taken advantage or I'm going to get hurt. But like, the reality is if you are both, not just one person. I mean, that's why I brought up the Rosalind thing. That's why I inferred that into it, because he got hurt because, in my view, he was committed to her, and it wasn't reciprocated. Whatever reason it may be, it was not reciprocated.
Right.
And he got hurt. We all hate that. But if you are both committed to each other, like both committed, like you're not going to get taken advantage of from the other person. I mean, not to set up like false expectations, like, things happen, we're human, but I'm saying
No, it's not that you're not going to get taken advantage of.
Not advantage of, not hurt, but it's...
No, you're willingly getting taken advantage of.
But you're like, at the end of the day, both of you have each other's best interest at heart.
Right. And that's that utter commitment.
It's not you're doing it from a selfish place. You're meeting each other's needs.
Right. That is exactly how it is. And that's why Romeo and Juliet is that beautiful story.
Yeah.
I mean, and then we look at, like, today, you talked about the fact that there's not commitment together. And that idea that they're not committed all of the time together does bring up a different point of view and a different idea. And that is that as they're there, they're committed, but our culture is not. Why? And what is the ramifications of that? That's the next question. That's the next idea that has to happen. And I actually find it really interesting because one of the harsh realities is that most of the things that came out of the 60s is garbage.
Like the hippie kind of culture.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm not anti-hippie. I'm anti-stupid ideas. That's really what I'm anti. So with the sexual revolution, there is an idea that you could go have sex with whoever, which, by the way, just doesn't actually work. And you're going to have meaningless, non-fulfilled sex forever, and that's okay for you if you want a meaningless, non-fulfilled life. But if you want a meaningless, fulfilled life, one partner is probably the way to go. But,
Meaningful, fulfilled life, correct?
Yeah, meaningful, fulfilled life. Not meaningless. Meaningful, fulfilled life, one partner. Meaningless, unfulfilled life, multiple parties. That's okay. And every study, every culture has ever proven this. So as we look at this, we see this idea that from the 60s and the sexual revolution, we fundamentally changed the idea of the covenant. Or not just the covenant, but the idea of how they work and how it actually should be in a marriage. And that is my happiness, my temporary happiness and temporary whims go and do whatever I want to do, and it's best for everyone if I do what I want to do. There's an interesting song in the 60s. It's called The Kids Are Gonna Be Alright. It's by The Who. And the gist of the song, it's something like this. It goes, if I can remember correctly, it says, I don't mind if another guy dances with my girl. And he goes on with that. And the chorus is the kids are going to be all right, but I need to leave. So what's it's referring to is a married couple who have kids. He doesn't love her enough, so he's okay with her dating somebody else. He's not that committed to her. Not love. He's not committed to her. And then the second thing is he's already looking to get out. He's already leaving. And the idea of the song is the kids are going to be all right. Now, the interesting thing is, art doesn't lie. Art can say stupid things, because that's what people thought, but it doesn't lie. And then in the 90s, we reaped the benefits of it. And there's another band called The Offspring. I don't know if you ever heard of The Offspring, but there's The Offspring. And they had their biggest hit ever. And its song was called The Kids Aren't Gonna Be Alright. As a direct response to The Who. From not just like, you're wrong right away, like that idea is stupid, like you and me talking. No, it's, we have 3 decades of this and we're not okay. The kids are not okay. And he starts it with one street, so many broken lives and shattered dreams. Just on one street. So that concept of not being able to be committed, we see that, oh yeah, it's going to be good. The kids are going to be all right. Well, we fast forward, we see that all it leaves is destruction and pain.
I'm trying to think of a way to rightly phrase this, but it almost seems like, now it's coming from a place of, I will commit once I find out if you're gonna let me do whatever I want. As opposed to, hey, we're committed to each other. And, there's got to be a form of commitment. And you should be finding out within that commitment if there is fun or not. And see, I'm struggling formulating the thought process here because instead, it's like we're using commitment as the afterthought, as opposed to saying, hey, when we are committed together, we have, you should be seeing, and I think this kind of falling apart as I'm trying to explain.
No, I don't think it, so you're saying, this is your idea, is that you are committed as long as I can have the fun I want to have.
Yeah.
And Yet when we talk about commitment, we feel like it's bondage and no fun.
Bondage and no fun. Yes.
Okay.
And so it's almost like if we are focused on each other committed, then that can't be any fun because I don't get it. If it's not necessarily you have to give everything up. It's where's the priority shifting from being over here to my external factors towards the person you're committed.
Okay. No. Actually, I think that you're right on. That turn is where we're at now. Where is that turn? And we're just going to go because that turn is directly related to sex.
No, 100%, because it's like I can go out and do whatever I want to do, but as long as I can come home and have sex with you, then we're in a relationship.
Right, but as long as that's fun. Now here's the crazy thing. Sex without commitment is no fun.
No, 100%, yeah.
So there's just simply that. Now this is why, and we're going to get more graphic right now because it's kind of part of the reality with this. Because we have that idea that, I mean, you look at the kids are all right. I'm going to go find somebody else to fulfill my desires. He's not going to fulfill his desires. And this is where we have really, really, really messed up as a church. So bad. And probably, I would say one of our great failures is here. Because we don't actually say what marriage is. So when you are committed is fun.
And like, even from a young age, and, you know, like I said, I'm always a firm believer, even from, you know, a young age is teaching, we myself, this is why I'm so interested in this stuff,
right.
It's like, you got to be able to teach these stuff. Is like, if you think about, like, where we learned a lot, like, as kids, here, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the baby and the baby carriage. That's, where do they learn that? That's their view of things, right? And then it's kind of like, where does it develop from there? Where do we enter into the conversation? You know, we talk about...
Well, it's because it's taboo and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot easier to get drunk and try to find a girl that's also drunk, that has lower inhibitions, and is willing to sleep with you to make each of you feel better about yourselves, even though you hate yourselves in every regard.
And it's almost like you go after those things in order to fulfill that stuff that you hate about yourself. Myself included, you know, mistakes that I've made, you know, saying like,
right.
Instead of dealing with the issues and facing the giants or the demons of your own life, you look to the one escape for relief, whether that's through sex, whether that's through drugs, whether that's through alcohol, you know, and, you know, in the Bible, Paul sits there, and I think it was Romans 14, it was, you know, we had the big old conversation about it, you know, people struggled with it, but, you know, Paul literally says in there, he's convinced that nothing created is evil. It goes back to the intentions of the heart. What are you using these things for as an escape?
Right.
And so, I don't know exactly where I was going with that, but that was that kind of what you, like when you started touching on, you know, going to sex and not being committed and using it to cover up, you know, the things that you hate about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't flack people for it, but I also, because I understand how scary that is. You know, it's like...
I flack them. No, that is completely their fault.
When I say flack them, it's not like I don't say...
You don't blame them? No, I do.
Okay.
And here's why. They're lazy individuals.
Okay.
If you have a bad sex life in your marriage, that's your fault. The end. It's because you're lazy. Man and woman.
Married, I agree. With there. I was speaking like out of marriage
context.
Oh,
I was like, speaking in marriage.
Yeah, marriage, yeah.
So when you look at marriage, and you look at bad sex lives there, it is strictly because both parties are lazy.
Lack of intentionality.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
And I think I said this in the last one, but like, you can't sit there, go from this dating phase, and then get married, and then all of a sudden say, "Well, I made it. We're done." Like,
no, because you have to get to the end. You have to get to death.
to death, yeah, and that's where I think the stopping line has to move from marriage to death.
I mean,
you know,
there's the biggest joke with Romeo and Juliet, and if there's a criticism I have of it, is they only were married for like 3 days. Great 3 days, but they made it to death really fast. It's a lot. It is difficult to have a long-term marriage.
yeah.
It's really difficult, and it's a lot of work. But if you're willing to put in the work, are you actually willing to put in the work? Most people say no. Most people would be like, yeah, nah, I'll be someone else.
Yeah.
It's not great. So, yeah. Any other questions you have on that?
No, I mean, it's just interesting to me. The whole, the death piece of it and the commitment piece of it is something that I think needs to be hammered home more, or spend time with, just kind of marinating in that, kind of as individuals, as a society, and even in the church. I mean, this is something I genuinely, the more I've kind of been around that area, is, we need to be a better job and not let, society or social media be the leading influencers of those discussions.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely need to discuss it and be, get beyond just saying, wait till marriage to have sex, as an example. Like, yes, it's right. It's one of the common cliches, but it's like, everything is bad. Sex is bad. Wait till your marriage. And then all of a sudden sex is this great thing and you should have lots of it, but giving people context and saying, here's the reasons behind this. Here's why commitment. You're not losing fun by doing these things, and kind of going into the deeper issues of that.
But here's the problem: they are losing fun.
Who's losing fun? The
Christian church, society.
Explain.
Oh gosh, yeah. You're gonna get me to say like here it is. Here it is. What do you think we're doing when we ask somebody with hormones that are outside the realm to wait 10 to 15 years before they get married?
Yeah.
How stupid are we?
No, 100%. Yeah.
It is. And how stupid are we also at this? You're never going to look better.
Yeah.
Okay. That's just a dumb thing. Everyone's like, I want to have sex with a hot woman. Well, get married younger.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm sorry, age works. We are literally saying to everyone, you have hormones, repress them for 10 years. Now, I'm not saying everyone should get married when they're 15. But what I'm saying is, looking at marriage getting to 27, even 25, 30, 35, you missed out on 10 years. Now, in the end, everyone's talking about sex, but they've missed out on a decade worth of it. That's horrible. It's like the worst thing you could ever imagine to do it. So why on earth are we telling people to do that? When the Christian church goes, yeah, it's because we're doing it. No, it's because we have to demonize it to hell for someone not to get married. Because we're like, don't do it. And it's like, why I want to? Why God created it? And it's not weed. I mean, it's actually something that God talked about in the Bible that you want to do.
He straight up created it.
And we push it so far. It's so bad. And I hate it because I just see the destruction that it leads.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, we have guys that are masturbating 5 times a day right now. 5 times a day. We know that leads to erectile dysfunction early. There's a correlation. Weird. Huh. Okay. That's it. Porn use is at an all-time high. Physical contact, all-time low. Actual sex, all-time low. We have an issue. I don't think the answer is go self-pleasure yourself for 10 freaking years. I just don't. And then we're like, well, don't do that either. It's like, they're going to do something. Like, they're going to do something. I cannot tell a 28-year-old, don't masturbate. Why? Because he's going to do it. I can say it. He's going to do it.
In the words of Fez from that 70s show, he has needs.
Because we have been so stupid to say, let's just push it off, push it off, push it off, push it off. And then we're shocked that things happen. Yeah, you're shocked because you're stupid. That's why. Paul, literally, to answer this question, said in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, craziest thing, it's a Stoic philosophy. He answers a Stoic philosophy there. He says, because of the question to him was, it's good for a man not to touch a woman. Okay, that's a Stoic philosophy. That's Stoicism. That's the philosophy. Paul, by the way, was celibate, chosen by God. That's the way it is. But his response was, because of your sexual immorality, get married. And we forget that that's actually said. And the simplicity of that is genius. It's Stoic wisdom meets biblical wisdom with how to actually have Stoic wisdom.
If you can't do it, it's going to burn you up. Go get married and let your passions burn.
But then, it's really, he doesn't even just stop there. He then says this next thing. Every husband render the affection due to his wife, and every wife render the affection due to her husband. For the wife doesn't own her own body, the husband doesn't own his own body, the wife does. Crazy verse. Amazing verse.
You both have needs.
He basically says sexual immorality is anything outside of the bedroom. And or inside the marriage bedroom. And that is as long you can do whatever the heck you want as long as it doesn't involve another person. That is the literal biblical guideline. So so Paul says, get married and then go explore. So we are so stupid to say, don't explore in your 20s when you actually, look good. No one wants to talk about that either. They're like, oh yeah, that's so, it matters. I'm sorry. Like, just, there's a reason that Victoria's Secret's sales are going down as they change their models. It just is. It matters to both men and women. Men want to look good too. For themselves. Selfish. Women want to look good for themselves. They want their partner to look good. They want to look good. It's weird. Do it. As you get older, once again, awkwardness goes away. You can do other things. It doesn't matter as much. This is a really big deal. So why are we doing it? And that's our own fault. We have completely screwed the pooch here. And yes, I know it sounds like I'm just saying, go get married young. Probably saying go and get married young. It's probably one of the wiser things you could do as long as you're willing to commit.
Yeah. Guys, go commit.
Well, I think we're going to end it there. So thanks for coming by.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Be willing to die, go commit, and go start making some babies.
Go start making babies. All right. Well, you like and subscribe, and hit us up next week.
See you guys.